once again, Brian Lee, my good friend. I love the chat, guys. Thanks for having Bob on tonight. Thanks, Brian, for being such a great friend and supporter of the channel and the stream team. He had a question that I want to piggyback onto that super chat. He said, "Hey guys, is it normal for bees to be in the top box of a double deep this time of year?" Keep in mind, he is in the Birmingham, Alabama area, so he's in the south, but a little bit north of me.
If bees are in the top box right now, it means they don't have enough food.
Okay.
The top box should be, it's time to make that top box full of food, and the brood nest should be in the bottom box.
Do you find, Bob, that if you feed them right now, whatever the method you use, they will go ahead and put the food in the top box and move down? Is that what they will do naturally, or will they put the food in the bottom box?
A little of both, but it's natural for them to, as they, of course, depending on where he's at, brood rearing's coming to a close here pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. He actually called me today and talked about it. And he says he's having some robbing issues and stuff, and he's put the robber. So I said, he's got bucket feeders on, possibly he got from Greg, and I suggested. I hope I told him right. I said, maybe you could put some open feed a ways away from the bees on the other side of the house where you don't go in and out, your wife doesn't go in and out, and just get the bees busy thinking that they're not, they're actually out collecting nectar. Get them busy doing something instead of just staying around the hives. And I thought that might be a solution. But he's got the entrances reduced. He's got the robbing screens on, so I think they're going to be okay. Yeah. But I think he is feeding them. He actually has screen bottom boards that he's also put the base in there, so he's closed everything off. I think he's done the right thing.
Yeah, but you just mentioned something that's a problem. If you have a screen bottom board and you have a slide under the screen, and the bees do not keep up entirely with the syrup that's dripping out of the bucket, there's a robbing problem. It'll run off of that sliding board or plastic, whatever he's using, and then it's kind of like the same problem you run into with Boardman feeders. If when it warms up in the morning, you get a little more drip than the colony can keep track of and keep cleaned up, it can leak to the exterior of the colony somehow, and that's a robbing frenzy in the making right there.
Okay, so
what I would do if he's using buckets is I'd be careful how many holes there is in the plug. I know what Greg's plugs are like, and you can have 2 holes or you can have 22. And if you got too many holes, you can actually put beeswax over some of the holes, and oddly enough, the bees won't remove it. They don't understand there's syrup on the other side of those holes. How many holes do you put in your plugs, Greg, if he got them from you?
I don't know that he got the plugs from us. We usually ship the plugs out blank. What we recommend as a safety measure is folks start with 2 to 3 holes, depending on the size of the colony and also what viscosity that they're using. By and large, on our plugs, we don't 2-gallon buckets. We don't have more than 4 holes, and using Pro Sweet. But folks that are using a thin syrup or they're just getting the hang of the buckets, we usually like them to be conservative at around 3 holes and just gauge and see if that's taking care of what the bees need or if they need to add more. What we found by doing that, it reduces the amount that may drip or purge at first, and it also is enough that the bees can tend to without it pulling on that bottom board, causing any other host of issues.
Also, there's another thing that people make a mistake with buckets and plugs, is they make the holes too big. We use a 1/16 of an inch, and what you can go 1/64 over that. I forget what it is. Is it 5/64 or something? And just that extra 1/64 can make it drip in the morning. Whereas with the 1/16, you don't get much drip.
Right.
So sometimes the holes are a little bit too big that people put in there.
Well, that's really good. Their own lids. They're, we send a lot of buckets out that are ready to go, where the holes are right in the lids. Everything's nice and snug and tight. But a lot of folks have made a mistake where they've either seen our video years ago or they've seen Bob's video, and they try to put together a system to do that, and they're ordering what they think is a 50-millimeter hole saw, or they end up going to Lowe's or Home Depot. They can't find a metric, so they end up with a 2-inch, or they buy a 50-millimeter off Amazon that truly isn't 50 millimeters, and they end up with a hole that's just a little too big. They put a plug in there. It doesn't catch vacuum. It leaks around the plug, and then they give me a call and say, hey, what's going on? It was a real big problem around COVID because nearly every hole saw, unfortunately, is Chinesium. And there was a drastic variance on the diameter and how that was listed. A lot of those hole saws, which is why the adjustable hole saw, I think, is the way to go, because you can tighten that rascal up. And if you want to go 49.4 millimeters, even if your drill press has a little wobble in it, it'll still be right to where the plug will seal off. But if you are going the hole saw route, a lot of those hole saws where a 50 millimeter is nice if it's truly a 50 millimeter hole saw, but that's 50 millimeters outside dimension on the tooth offset. Some of those teeth are offset just a hair where the shoulder of the hole saw is 50 millimeters, but the teeth are offset just enough where your some are right past 50. You're like 50.2 or 50.3. The plug doesn't seat, it leaks. We get the call, we go back through. And the other thing is when folks they're skeptical about the bucket. They, which I understand, they're not sure how it works. They will fill it full of water, and then they'll put a plug in, and then they'll flip it over, and they'll get a call and say their buckets are leaking. And I'm thinking, okay, well, run me through, what are we looking at? Well, I put water in the bucket, I put the plug in, I flipped it over, and I can see water coming out where the plug is. When I ask them, well, how many holes do you have in the plug? Well, I don't have any holes in the plug yet. I'm just testing to see if it so putting the plug in there allows the vacuum to actually engage in the bucket, and then you can see water just suspend in the droplet. So there's a lot of nuance with buckets, but once you get the hang of it, you'll realize it's not a silver bullet, but is a very effective tool that does a lot of jobs really well.
Well, there's another thing that people do with buckets that can cause robbing, and I used to do it myself. I don't know what you do, Greg, but we tell our customers, do not ever take the lid off. Once that lid's on, do not take the tear tab off.
Right.
Fill through the plug hole,
Right.
because once you start taking that lid on and off, it can start seeping through the gasket, the lid gasket, and that can cause robbing. And so that's something.
There's a little secret we found out about 3 years ago when we put the first video out there. We put all the links to where everybody can buy all the stuff. Well, where we were buying our buckets and lids, we couldn't get lids. And we were using the gasket lids at first. Well, the gasket lids weren't even available, and I needed 200 or 300 of the lids. So I ordered just the regular pail lids and tried those. And those regular pail lids, that's all we use now. Of course, the 2-gallon buckets, you've got to have the gasket. The 1-gallon buckets, we don't even use the gasket seal anymore because the standard pail lid seals it off beautifully, no problems. And if folks want to pull the lid to clean or pull to fill, they can. But if you pull the tear tab on any gasket lid, that rascal is not going to go back on there and seal, and it'll seep and it'll spill and it'll be a nightmare. But the standard pail lids with no gasket are beautiful. They work great, and you can get in there and clean it if you want to.